What if some of the greatest Cold War spy thrillers of the 1960s were sitting online, free to watch? This was the decade of double agents, coded messages, and shadowy meetings in back alleys where every glance could mean betrayal. Hollywood gave us the glamour. Europe added pulp energy, and even the Soviets joined the game. And the best part? You don't need to spend a cent to see them. Let's uncover 12 thrillers still worth watching. Charade, 1963. Imagine this. Audrey Hepburn is being chased through Paris by a lineup of mysterious men, each one after a fortune she doesn't even know exists. Enter Cary Grant, suave as ever. But is he her ally? Or just another charming face hiding secrets? That's the hook of Charade, a film that critics often call the best Hitchcock movie Hitchcock never made. The plot begins when Hepburn's character, Regina, finds out her husband has been killed and a stash of stolen money is missing. Suddenly, a string of menacing figures are on her trail, each convinced she knows more than she lets on. Cary Grant's character swoops in to help, or maybe mislead her, depending on which scene you're watching. And that uncertainty is exactly what makes Charade a timeless Cold War-era thriller. Released in 1963, it blends the sophistication of romantic comedy with the tension of international intrigue. It's also dripping with style Paris backdrops, witty dialogue, and that undeniable chemistry between Hepburn and Grant. The soundtrack, composed by Henry Mancini, keeps the suspense ticking like a time bomb. What makes this one so special is how it straddles genres. It's part spy movie, part mystery, part screwball romance. That balance makes it endlessly rewatchable. And here's the kicker. Due to a copyright slip, Charade fell into the public domain in the United States. That means it's legally free to stream on multiple platforms, from YouTube to Tubi. Think of it as the perfect entry point into Cold War cinema, sophisticated, thrilling, and with just enough humor to keep it light on its feet. It doesn't just hold up, it shines. The Man Who Never Was, 1966 TV version. If you think Cold War cinema was only about slick spies and exotic gadgets, The Man Who Never Was proves otherwise. This 1966 adaptation, based on the famous true story of Operation Mincemeat, blends fact and fiction into a tense, clever thriller that feels as relevant now as it did then. The premise: British intelligence plants false documents on a corpse to mislead enemy forces. But here's the twist: the story doesn't stop at the operation. It dives into the ripple effects, the paranoia, and the lengths both sides would go to protect or uncover the truth. Instead of focusing on car chases, the film thrives on psychological tension. Every phone call, every coded exchange feels like it could shift the outcome of history. What makes this 60s version compelling is how grounded it is. There are no overblown set pieces, just the slow burn of suspense, backed by sharp writing and solid performances. It treats espionage not as glamorous escapism, but as a nerve-wracking mind game where mistakes cost lives. For modern viewers, it's also fascinating as a piece of Cold War storytelling inspired by World War II strategies. It shows how history shaped the spy films that followed, especially in their obsession with deception and misdirection. And the best part? The Man Who Never Was is preserved online in archives and streaming platforms like YouTube, meaning you can experience this tense slice of spy cinema for free. It's not flashy, but it's unforgettable, a reminder that sometimes the sharpest weapons in a spy's arsenal are lies, patience, and nerves of steel. The Chairman, 1969. Picture this: Gregory Peck, the ultimate embodiment of American gravitas, walking into communist China with a tiny device lodged in his brain. Sounds like science fiction? Not at all. It's the Cold War paranoia of The Chairman, released in 1969, cranked up to cinematic high gear. In the film, Peck plays Dr. John Hathaway, a scientist recruited to infiltrate China and steal the formula for a revolutionary enzyme that could solve food shortages worldwide. But here's the kicker: he's been implanted with a microtransmitter that allows US intelligence to hear every word he says. And if things go sideways, they can, well, let's just say they can shut him down remotely. The idea alone makes your skin crawl, especially when you realize how much it echoes real Cold War fears of surveillance and control. Unlike lighter Euro spy romps, The Chairman takes itself seriously. It's less about car chases and more about tension, about one man trying to keep his cover while every step forward could mean the end. The cinematography makes full use of stark contrasts, vast Chinese landscapes that swallow up Hathaway, claustrophobic interiors where every glance could expose him. What really works here is Peck himself. His presence gives the movie an instant weight. You believe him as the reluctant hero, a man of science forced into a spy game he doesn't truly understand. It's that vulnerability, mixed with Peck's trademark determination, that sells the whole premise. For a movie released in 1969, it's surprisingly modern in its paranoia. And yes, you can find the entire film legally available on YouTube, free, ad-supported, and ready to stream. It might not have the glossy fun of a Bond flick, but it offers a darker, more unsettling take on Cold War espionage. And sometimes, that's even more thrilling. The Corrupt Ones, 1967. Now, let's take a detour into the pulpier side of the 60s with The Corrupt Ones, a film that feels like a fever dream of Cold War spy adventures. Released in 1967, this one stars Robert Stack, yes, the same Robert Stack, who would later terrify generations as the host of Unsolved Mysteries. Here, though, he's knee-deep in espionage, treasure hunts, and dangerous encounters across Asia. The plot kicks off when a photographer stumbles onto a mysterious medallion linked to a hidden treasure. Naturally, this discovery pulls him into a world of spies, gangsters, and femme fatales who all want a piece of the action. Suddenly, he's dodging ambushes, running through exotic locations, and trying to stay alive long enough to figure out who's on his side. What makes The Corrupt Ones memorable is its sheer energy. It doesn't pretend to be subtle, it goes all in on the spectacle. You get bold colors, striking set designs, and that 60s sense of glamour that makes every shot pop. The pace is relentless, almost comic book-like, with danger popping up at every corner. Stack brings a rugged charisma to the role, even if he doesn't quite fit the typical suave spy mold, and that's part of the charm. This isn't about a flawless super agent, it's about a guy way over his head, relying on grit and instinct to make it through. Today, The Corrupt Ones lives online in full, often on YouTube in surprisingly good quality. For fans of pulpy spy flicks, it's a ride worth taking. It might not have the polish of Hollywood classics, but it's brimming with that 60s zest for adventure. And honestly, sometimes, messy energy beats perfect polish. The Venetian Affair, 1967. If you want your Cold War spy thrillers drenched in atmosphere, The Venetian Affair delivers in spades. Released in 1967, it stars Robert Vaughn, fresh off his success in The Man from UNCLE as a disgraced American journalist, drawn back into the shadowy world of espionage. The story opens with a shocking act. An American diplomat detonates an explosive at a peace conference in Vienna. Who was pulling the strings? That's the mystery Vaughn's character Bill Fenner is pulled into unraveling. His search leads him to Venice, where the city's misty canals, looming cathedrals, and labyrinthine alleys become the perfect backdrop for a game of suspicion and betrayal. What makes this film unique is how it blends classic noir moodiness with Cold War paranoia. Fenner isn't a polished super agent, he's haunted, disillusioned, and forced to navigate a world where allies are scarce and motives are murky. The Venetian setting adds a haunting elegance, turning every shadow into a potential ambush and every foggy night into a stage for double dealing. Robert Vaughn gives the film its edge, bringing the right mix of charm and weariness. Paired with Elke Sommer as the femme fatale, the cast drives a story that feels both stylish and tragic. It doesn't try to mimic Bond, it carves its own niche, darker and more brooding. Today, The Venetian Affair can be found on free archives and platforms like YouTube, often preserved in surprisingly good quality. It's a reminder that the Cold War wasn't just fought in smoky backrooms or sterile offices, it unfolded in some of the world's most beautiful cities, with lives hanging in the balance. The Quiller Memorandum, 1966. If you're looking for a spy film that ditches the glamour of tuxedos and martinis for icy paranoia, The Quiller Memorandum is your pick. Released in 1966, it stars George Segal as Quiller, an American agent operating in West Berlin, a city divided, tense, and crawling with danger. The setup is razor sharp. Quiller is assigned to investigate a neo-Nazi organization suspected of plotting a comeback under the cover of Cold War chaos. But unlike Bond or other action-heavy spies of the decade, Quiller isn't armed with gadgets or unstoppable bravado. He's alone, vulnerable, and constantly under surveillance. The tension doesn't come from explosions, it comes from conversations where every word could be a trap. The real highlight? The screenplay, written by Harold Pinter. It's full of sharp, loaded dialogue that drips with menace. Instead of loud shootouts, you get eerie silences, probing questions, and the sense that Quiller is always one step away from being swallowed whole. And then there's Alec Guinness, lending gravitas as Quiller's superior, pulling the strings with calm precision. What makes the Quiller Memorandum so haunting is its authenticity. It reflects a Cold War world where enemies weren't always obvious, and the battleground wasn't just streets or borders, it was ideology. The film captures that paranoia perfectly, reminding us that espionage was often about who could outthink, not outgun the other side. Best of all, it's still accessible today through free streaming on platforms like YouTube and in public domain-style archives. For modern viewers, it feels surprisingly fresh, quietly intense, unsettling, and far more cerebral than its flashier cousins. If you want a spy thriller that makes you lean in rather than sit back, The Quiller Memorandum delivers. It's the thinking person's Cold War classic, and it holds up brilliantly. Danger Route, 1967. What happens when your job as a spy makes you numb to everything, even killing? That's the bleak question at the heart of Danger Route, a 1967 British thriller that takes a far darker, more cynical view of Cold War espionage. Forget the glamorous life of Bond. This one dives into the burnout, paranoia, and brutal toll of life as a government assassin. The film follows Jonas Wilde, a seasoned British operative tasked with eliminating a Soviet defector. But things go sideways quickly, and suddenly Wilde finds himself trapped in a deadly spiral of betrayal. What makes Danger Route unusual for its time is how unflinching it is about the psychological cost of espionage. Wilde isn't suave or witty. He's tired, broken, and dangerously close to snapping. Visually, the movie leans into that mood. The sets are spare, the lighting stark, and the pacing deliberate, all designed to underline Wilde's inner collapse. It's less about the glamour of spying and more about the poison it leaves behind. When you think about the time it was released in the thick of Cold War paranoia, it feels like a deliberate counterpoint to the escapist fantasies audiences were used to. The lead performance by Richard Johnson adds real weight. He brings both physical presence and emotional exhaustion, making Wilde feel like a man trapped by his own profession. There's no easy victory here. No neat resolution, just the haunting sense that this line of work eats people alive. Danger Route is available today on free streaming platforms, often tucked into classic film collections. It's not a popcorn flick, it's something heavier, more reflective. And in that way, it's a rare gem from the 60s, a spy film that dares to strip the glamour away and show the cost. License to Kill, 1965. Here's a fun twist: Britain wanted its own spy franchise to rival Bond, so they gave us Charles Vine in License to Kill. Released in 1965, this film plays almost like a cheeky cousin to 007, leaning into adventure, action, and a protagonist who isn't afraid to wink at the absurdity of it all. The premise is simple. Charles Vine, a scientist turned reluctant spy, is called in to protect a defecting Eastern scientist who possesses sensitive knowledge that could tip the Cold War balance. Of course, things don't go smoothly. Soon, Vine is neck-deep in double agents, international conspiracies, and danger lurking around every corner. What makes License to Kill so entertaining is how knowingly it rides the Bond wave without completely copying it. Vine is less polished, less refined, but arguably more relatable. He doesn't always have the perfect gadget or the perfect line. He's a scrappier figure, relying on quick thinking and grit rather than a tuxedo and charm. That slight roughness gives the film its own personality. Visually, it embraces 60s British cinema aesthetics, urban streets, moody interiors, and the occasional dash of exotic locales. The pacing is brisk, filled with set pieces that keep things lively. Sure, it doesn't have the sheen of Goldfinger or From Russia with Love, but that's part of its charm. It's a smaller film with a bigger heart. For a while, License to Kill was overshadowed and nearly forgotten, but the digital age revived it. Now, you can find it on free platforms like archive collections and YouTube, where it stands as a fascinating alternative to the mega-budget Bond films. Watching it today, you can't help but smile at its earnestness. It may not be Bond, but it never needed to be. License to Kill proves that even the imitators had something unique to offer in the 60s spy boom. Where the Spies Are, 1966. Now, what if you took James Bond's style, toned down the gadgetry, and handed the mission to David Niven? That's exactly what you get with Where the Spies Are, released in 1966. Niven plays a doctor who just wants a quiet life, but fate and the British Secret Service have other plans. The story kicks off when Dr. Jason Love is recruited for a mission in the Middle East. The reason? He once dabbled in intelligence work during the war, and now he's seen as the perfect, unobvious candidate. Naturally, the job escalates from a simple handoff into a deadly spiral of double crosses, shadowy agents, and tense confrontations under desert suns. What makes this film a standout is its mix of humor and danger. Niven, always the epitome of British wit, plays Love as a man constantly caught between wanting to run home and realizing he's in too deep to walk away. He's not Bond, and he doesn't pretend to be. Instead, he's the reluctant spy, charming, intelligent, but far more interested in survival than glory. The movie also captures the 60s fascination with global intrigue. You get stylish locations, quick-witted banter, and just enough suspense to keep you hooked. It's a lighter take on the Cold War, but that doesn't make it any less engaging. If anything, its humor makes the darker moments land harder. Today, Where the Spies Are often appears on free ad-supported streaming services and in public archives. It's a reminder that not every spy needed to be flawless sometimes. Being human made the story better. And honestly, who wouldn't want to watch David Niven charm his way through the Cold War? The Double Man, 1967. What if your greatest threat wasn't an enemy spy, but someone who looked exactly like you? That's the chilling hook of The Double Man, a 1967 Cold War thriller starring Yul Brynner. Brynner plays Dan Slater, a U.S. intelligence officer who travels to Austria after his son's mysterious death on the slopes. But once he arrives, the story takes a sinister turn. Slater is targeted by Eastern operatives who plan to replace him with a perfect double and imposter who can infiltrate American intelligence from the inside. Suddenly, this isn't just a story about espionage, it's about identity, trust, and the terrifying possibility of being erased by your own reflection. Unlike the flashy escapades of Bond, The Double Man leans into psychological suspense. Its European settings are cold and isolating, mirroring Slater's paranoia as he realizes how deep the conspiracy runs. Brynner, with his intense presence, nails the role balancing a father's grief with a professional's determination, while also embodying the cold precision of his doppelganger. Watching him play against himself adds another layer of tension that never lets up. What makes this film stand out is how it captures the paranoia of the Cold War in a uniquely personal way. It's not just about political systems clashing, it's about the terrifying idea that you could be replaced and no one would ever know. That fear of infiltration, of enemies hiding in plain sight, was exactly what made the Cold War so unnerving. Today, The Double Man can be found on free streaming archives and classic film platforms, making it accessible for modern viewers. It may not have the glossy sheen of bigger hits, but it's one of those thrillers that crawls under your skin and stays there. If you want a Cold War spy story with real psychological bite, this one's unmissable. The Ipcress File, 1965. If James Bond was the glamorous face of 60s espionage, Harry Palmer was its gritty, working-class counterpoint. The Ipcress File, released in 1965, stars Michael Caine as Palmer, a weary intelligence officer who trades tuxedos and martinis for paperwork, sarcasm, and cheap glasses. The plot centers on Palmer investigating the mysterious kidnappings of British scientists. At first, it looks like simple enemy abductions, but the deeper he digs, the stranger it gets. Eventually, he uncovers a mind control plot, a chilling reflection of Cold War anxieties about psychological warfare. Unlike Bond's globe-trotting adventures, the Ipcress File keeps things grounded. Palmer isn't a super spy, he's a cog in the machine, constantly clashing with bureaucracy and superiors. The film is shot with a striking visual style, tilted camera angles, claustrophobic frames, and a cold, gray London that feels every bit as threatening as the villains. What makes it unforgettable is Michael Caine himself. He plays Palmer with a mix of wit, defiance, and quiet toughness, creating one of the most relatable spies of the decade. He's no superhero, just a man trying to survive a system designed to chew him up. The Ipcress file is widely available through classic film archives and free-to-stream platforms. It's smart, stylish, and a perfect antidote to the glossy spy fantasies of its time. If you want Cold War espionage with brains and grit, this is the one. The Deadly Affair, 1967. When it comes to Cold War thrillers, John le Carré's fingerprints are everywhere. The Deadly Affair, released in 1967, adapts his novel Call for the Dead and offers a spy story drenched in melancholy, betrayal, and quiet devastation. James Mason stars as Charles Dobbs, a British intelligence officer investigating the suspicious death of a government official. On the surface, it looks like an open and shut case, but Dobbs digs deeper and uncovers layers of deceit, disillusionment, and connections to Soviet operatives that shake his faith in the system he serves. Unlike the flashier spy films of the era, The Deadly Affair thrives on mood. Cinematographer Freddie Young bathes the film in muted, washed-out colors that make everything feel bleak and uncertain. The conversations are slow, deliberate, and laced with unspoken menace. It's a spy story where the real battles are fought with words, glances, and moral compromises rather than bullets. Mason's performance is outstanding, world-weary, vulnerable, and quietly determined. He embodies the le Carré archetype, a spy who knows too much, who sees the cracks in the facade but keeps going because the job demands it. It's haunting, and it lingers long after the credits roll. Available now on platforms like YouTube and classic streaming libraries, The Deadly Affair may not be as well known as Bond, but it's every bit as important. It shows the other side of Cold War espionage, messy, human, and uncomfortably real. So there you have it. 12 Cold War spy thrillers from the 1960s you can stream free right now. From the elegance of Charade to the paranoia of the chairman and the playful charm of Our Man in Marrakesh, these films prove spy cinema was more than Bond. It was a whole movement of style and intrigue. Which one will you watch first? Comment below, subscribe for more, and share this list with a fellow movie fan.